Hello, this is a tutorial to go through how to get raw data from the Apple Mac version of LabChart Reader into a format that can be used in a written report, published paper, article, or similar. This is a file loaded up into LabChart Reader on my MacBook. You can see I've just selected 3 channels that I want to zoom in on and use for an annotated raw data trace. So just to speed things along, I'm going to highlight, as you would do in any other way, the data I want to select. So I've just highlighted in the top channel the area I want. By pressing the Shift key, I can then highlight the second channel I want, and then by maintaining a Shift button, I can then highlight the third channel. And you can see what I've done is, using the grey areas, I've encompassed the data that I wish to appear in the zoom view. I then go and click on the zoom view, and it loads up the same data sets, this time zoomed in onto the zoom view. While I'm in zoom view, the best thing to do is rescale the data so that we're happy with the way that the data are scaled. So I'm just going to expand some of these scales so they look a bit nicer. What I've got is airflow at the top. This is uncalibrated at the moment, it's in millivolts, but I'm not going to worry about that for the moment. Underneath we've got respiratory rate, which is the rate calculator taken from this airflow from a spirometry pod, and underneath we've got respiratory volume, which in this case is again in millivolts seconds, so it's just in volume units that are arbitrary, but again we're not going to worry about that. This isn't to show the physiology of respiratory dynamics, it's just to look at the way we express these data. So these windows in the Windows version of this software, so the zoom view window, if you then go to the edit copy zoom view, you can then paste it into PowerPoint and then edit it. And there's another tutorial online on my channel that explains how you can edit it, break it apart and move it around within PowerPoint. Well, that's very well and good for the Windows users, but as MacBook users, as Mac users want to be able to do this too, and at the moment using PowerPoint we can't do the same degree of editing. We can do the same degree of editing, however, in other software like Adobe Illustrator, and there may well be other free programs out there that allow you to edit vector drawings. I'd be surprised if there isn't another bit of software that will do that. But for the moment I'm just going to show you how I would do this in Adobe Illustrator and also how I would do it in PowerPoint. So starting with PowerPoint, the trick is to reduce the zoom window to a much smaller size than you'd expect. So I'm going to zoom it into about this size to maintain a nice aspect ratio to fit on a slide. And I'm again going to rescale to make sure that what I see on the left hand side of the window here is everything that I want to see. So for instance, there we are. I've got the nice scales. I don't want to see the graticule, this blue line. So if I go up to the setup and go to display settings, in this display settings window I can turn off the graticule, and you can see now the graticule has disappeared. I can also change the way that the time is viewed, so I can view it as seconds for instance, and you can see now here that seconds have appeared. I can do it from start of day, start of block, time of day, whatever. Get rid of the date. I can also change the way comments are viewed. So at the moment there are no comments in this window, but if there were comments you could hide them or show them, and you can show the lines between the blocks. But for the moment I just wanted to get rid of that graticule because I don't want these blue lines to appear on my final figure, so I'm going to hide that graticule and close that window. Once I'm fully happy with this image, and I'm very happy with it as it now, I'm going to go to the edit and choose copy zoom view. Now it's copied that view to the paste buffer at that size. So I go into PowerPoint and I go to edit and I can paste it. And you'll immediately see that the size of the text and the size of the fonts here look pretty good. I'm fairly happy with that. This scale has gone a bit awry, so if I delete this and go back to my LabChart Reader view, clearly this didn't quite work according to plan, so let's expand that a little bit more. That's, I think, better, so we'll copy that and then go back to PowerPoint and paste it in. Okay, it's done the same scale. It's a little bit annoying, we'll have to change that in a minute, but you can see very easily that this image now is actually very good quality. If I zoom right in, you'll see the lines here are actually very well produced. They're very representative of the data that's on the screen. They're not pixelated at all. It's actually a vector image. It's not editable within PowerPoint. However, what we can do is annotate it very quickly and easily. So just to make life easy for myself, I'm going to shrink it down a little bit. I'm going to make a copy of it. So Control-C, Control-V, or better still, I can click on it, pressing Alt and the Shift button, and drag it across so I've got a second copy. I want to remove this white space between the labels, so to do that I go to my picture format and I can crop it down so that this one now has no space. Go to the second image, crop that down the other way and remove like that, and then again pressing the Shift key I can bring this right back. So now I've got a slightly more condensed version of my data. If I zoom in to the x-axis, you'll notice these numbers are a bit wrong. These are 5-second intervals, but you can see they're labeled in seconds from the start of the file. The reason I did that, it just makes life easier to annotate it, and simply by inserting a text box and calling this 0, we can select it and make it a little bit smaller so it matches the size of the original text. And then what I'm planning to do with this 0 is move it so it's in line with the 0 here. And again, using the Alt and Shift trick, we can select the 0 and drag him and drop him onto the next number. Use the same trick again, drag him and drop him onto the next number. And we can do this until we've populated all of the x-axis with our numbers. There we go. I'm just doing this roughly. You can tidy this up, of course, once you've done it. And then, of course, I can edit this number and replace it with a 5, a 10, 15, 20, etc. So let's just do that quickly. So that's replaced those numbers now. So all I need to do is go back to my crop tool, which is in the picture format tool, crop out those numbers because I don't want them there. That's good, that's gone. Select my new numbers, which are down the bottom, and just move them up so they're in position. That's great. Don't forget to add your scale bar or your scale. So this is going to be time in seconds, and again I can reduce that down so it fits. Let's move it up there, make it a bit smaller. I think these fonts are a little bit too big still, so let's make them a little bit smaller again. Okay, so that took me about 3 minutes from start to finish, and I've now got what looks like a quite clean and tidy image. I may want to delete these scales accordingly and replace them with 100, 0 and 100. I could do that very simply just by, again, cropping in or covering it with a little white box and sorting that. I may want to annotate this, and of course I can then come in with the annotation tool. So for instance, to do some vertical lines to annotate the start or the end of an event, let's put an annotated line in here at 5 seconds. So I'm just putting a vertical line in and moving it into the right place for the 5-second mark. There we are. Remember, you can use the Shift button to restrain vertical and horizontal movements. And then again, I'm going to drag him to the 30 seconds. Let's just say something happened at 30 seconds. I've then got the ability to annotate these with, let's say, start and stop. So I can have a little start up here. Of course, this doesn't actually represent the data that we're looking at, but it's just a demonstration of how we might simply annotate this with some very simple words. So that's start, and then drop them over there for stop. And now that looks like a fairly nice figure. It makes a lot of sense. It looks quite interesting. Something else you can do, which is quite nice, is you can annotate it with various shapes. So if I just show you, here is a blue filled shape you can see is obscuring the data. If I send it to the back, you'll see it runs underneath the data, so you can actually put a blob, for instance, here and highlight the period maybe at which something was going on, and you can format this shape, get rid of the outline, for instance, and you could maybe change the fill so it's got some kind of transparency and make it a little bit lighter. Yep, so you've got a really good idea there that you can annotate this in many different ways, make it look quite acceptable. Copy it all now, so highlight everything and press Ctrl C. I'm just going to open up Microsoft Word on the screen in front of me. And if I go to the Edit window, Paste Special, I can then paste this as a PDF. This is quite important. If you paste it as a Microsoft Office graphic object, it tends to appear quite low resolution. Obviously a TIFF file is a bitmap graphic. We don't want to show it as that, but a PDF is the best option. Click on Paste, and there we are. A scalable, really good quality image that you can then annotate in Word, add a figure legend, etc. And I think that's a very acceptable way of showing these kind of data. So that's one very quick way of going it. We'll leave that version on the screen in front of us, and we'll go back to LabChart Reader with our zoom window. We're going to copy the zoom window again now, and this time I'm going to go to Adobe Illustrator. So this is Adobe Illustrator. Some of you may be familiar with this, others may not. I'm going to paste it, and this is where Illustrator comes into its own. This is now a fully editable image, and you can see I don't have to worry about moving things around and making duplicates. I can actually go into here at a really deep level and edit the fonts. I can change their size like this. I can make them bold. I can do all sorts of interesting things with them. I can also change the thickness of the lines. I can change the color of the lines, and everything is independently editable. Because the actual image itself is a vector image, it's made of lines, I can actually select the individual lines and move them around, as you can see here. I can scale them, and I can do everything I want to do, including changing their color. So if I decided I wanted that one blue, I want this one an orange color, and I actually want this one a red color. Well, it's a bit too pink, there we are. A red color. You can do that really very simply and very quickly, and it all does it from within Illustrator. So Illustrators are obviously a lot more powerful. You can do a lot more with your image. At the moment, this image is made of groups of data. If you click on some of these, you can't edit the individual lines, but if you click on each of these little objects, you can see it's a clip group. If you go to the Edit, so the Object menu, and choose Expand, it'll break this down into its components, and now I've actually got editable points. I can remove various objects there. I've just removed the box that surrounded these, and I could do the same throughout. So it actually gives you a very editable image. I don't need to worry about replacing these texts with new text. I can just delete them and retype in the numbers. So I can just type in 0 there. Of course, it's now missed the alignment, but that's not a problem. I can select all the data along here and re-edit them. So it's actually a really, really powerful tool for editing images. Of course, it does require you have Adobe Illustrator to be able to do this, but I will investigate whether there's any free software that will do the same job. Of course, you can annotate this in exactly the same way using all the illustration tools. The advantage of using Illustrator is you can add, for instance, a colored text box that's underneath your data. So I'm just going to change the color of this box to kind of a, let's see what I could choose, a nice very light blue, for instance. There we are, very subtle blue. And what I can do with that box is I can perhaps send that to the back. So I can go to Object, send to back. I can delete, there we are, the box surrounding the original data, and now I can actually use in this case a blue highlighting box to highlight parts of the data that I may find interesting. So you can do a lot more with an Illustrator than you perhaps could within PowerPoint. So if you can't get Illustrator, use PowerPoint. You can do a lot of editing on that. If you can get hold of Illustrator, it really is a very useful tool. Okay, this is a little addendum to this tutorial. This is a bit of software. I said I'd look for one, and I found one in about 5 minutes. This is Graphic by Indio Inc. It's $29.99. That's about £19 UK money, so not too expensive. It's actually a very good featured illustration program, rather like Adobe Illustrator. It allows you to use vector images for doing flow diagrams, for illustrations and other things. So that's just to show you what it is. This is it in action. This is the software loaded up. I've already copied the information from LabChart into the paste buffer, and I go here and I choose paste, and there are our data. At the moment it's a single object, so if I go to the Arrange window and choose Ungroup, it then becomes a group of little objects, and I can move them around. You can see I've got the same control that I had in Illustrator. I haven't yet learned how all the different systems work here, but clearly there we are. I seem to be able to adjust the size of text fairly easy. It's slightly different to Illustrator, and I'd need to learn, I think, how to use it a little bit more, but you can see that you can move text around. You can certainly make it bigger. There we are, bigger and smaller, and you can make it bold and all those other things. So clearly that's an option that maybe we could consider. It's not expensive really in the big scheme of things, and it would help with illustrations and also with editing of LabChart. So that's one option. I'll look for more options and come back.